So we are doing exercise 414 first on page 198 for the year 2014. Here are a debit and credit listing of our account balances. And so we need to do a classified balance sheet. How many columns do you have in yours? 3? Okay, I had a feeling you'd have 3. Now remember, my answer key will probably be, oh, mine actually does have 3. I'm really surprised by that. Wow. So here we go. You guys ready to do this? I would say you can lightly cross stuff off in your book as you'd finish them. Like put little dots or X's or even lightly cross things off as you finish them. Mine have violent cross-offs, but mine's the teacher one. So on a balance sheet, what are we starting with? Assets. Does it say assets on there? Woo, okay. Do you remember how many subcategories there are? 4. We may not use them all though, okay? Typically, it starts with current assets. So on that next empty line, go ahead and list current assets. So if there were only one current asset, we could stick that over in the right column, but there's going to be more. So if there's more, then we of course would total them as well. Tell me about current assets. What are their tendencies? We're going to use them within a year. We'll use them up or we'll turn them into cash. So they're very liquid assets, okay? As far as what order do you go in? I don't know. My gut instinct, how I learned accounting says put them in order of liquidity. So cash would be first and then what will turn into cash the fastest. It appears that that's the case here. So you have 3 columns, right? So you have a right, a left, and a left. The third column, or the one closest, we will only use in one instance, I think. Yeah, when we get into PPE. So let's use the middle one. The left one, not the left one. Cash comes in at $18,040. Why did we not stick that in the right column? It's not that total, and there's more than one. What would you say is another current asset that's going to get used or turned into cash within the year? AR. That means someone owes us money, and you hope that gets paid to us within a year. There's one more in the list. What's going to get used within a year? Yep, prepaid insurance is the last current asset. What's another one that's going to appear there often that didn't happen to be in this list? It starts with S. Supplies, yeah. Okay, so since that is our list of current assets, so in other words, a year or less, you can go ahead and single rule. What's going to go on the next line? Total assets? Total current assets. What I always tell students, and if you want to highlight, you can, the headings match the words with total. Those two go together. Remember, if we would have only had cash, we wouldn't need to put current assets, cash, and total current assets, because we could just stick cash over in the right column. That will happen later. If you don't want to indent, if you don't want to double indent, you can just kick that over. I'm not so worried about how indenting looks. What's another category? Current and then long-term. I can't remember if we have any long-term. No, we don't. Long-term means we're going to own, say, land or a building. But are we using it for our daily, day-in, day-out stuff? No. It's the example of my parents own a home, but then they have that lake lot they're going to build on when they retire. Okay. That's not part of their day-to-day grind. Yes. Assume it would say buildings used, or buildings not part of daily use. Like it would probably say, like buildings, we need to assume that's PPE. If it's a building or land, and it would be more of a long-term asset, it'd probably say buildings dash not for daily use. Does that make sense? Good question. So we're going to skip the long-term one. What's another one? PPE, what does that stand for again? Property, plant, and equipment. Since you're fairly new at this, I would put property, plant, and equipment, but then put /PPE. On a test, I'd be okay with PPE, as long as you know what that means. So, what are some of our PPEs? Stuff that's going to be around for a while. Buildings, what else? Land, what else? Equipment. Okay, let's stop there. Carly brought up such a good point. How do we know if that's PPE, like we're using it, or not? I really think it would say, like, this is not part of our daily use or our livelihood of our business. What do you see over in the credit column pertaining to PPE? Accumulated depreciation on buildings, accumulated depreciation on equipment. Oh, we didn't even notice that one. Okay, so that means some of our assets, although like we'll use buildings for example, buildings are valued at $128,800. Their contra assets $42,600. So they really aren't worth what they say they are, because it's devaluing as the year goes on. So we're going to actually kick some. Well, let's start with land. Why are we starting with land? Because it doesn't have a contra asset or depreciation. So you can put land in the left column. But with equipment, with buildings, those have a little contra asset, so we're going to use the left column to do the math and then bring it over. Does that make sense? All right, now my answer key might not be the best format. We'll see how it looks. So buildings. We're going to kick that value of $128,800 in the left column. Why have we shoved it over another column yet? Because we have to account for that contra asset that's devaluing it. What's devaluing it? I really want you to use the word less accumulated depreciation. And yay, my answer key does look nice. What a nice surprise here on a Thursday morning. So buildings, less the depreciation or less the accumulated depreciation on the buildings. I am single ruling and then putting the amount over in that column. So we're using left to do math to kick it over into the left column. So that's like saying in 2014 that building is, although it's valued at $128,800, it's lost some value, and overall it'd probably be worth $86,200 if we had to sell it today. Does that make sense? Now that you know that, I want you to try the equipment on your own. Do the equipment less the accumulated depreciation on the equipment on your own. Like putting the 42 and the 86 on the same line. Is that what you mean? Yeah, equipment can go next because you're all under the PPE heading right now. Okay, so we've got land without depreciation. We've got buildings and equipment with depreciation. I want you to take a peek at what they did here. All of PPE, the 67, the 86, and the 43, get added up. But I personally would put, I don't like what they did there. Instead of putting total assets, I think that should say, what do you think I'm going to put there? Total PPE. And I'd put this 196,800 down on that line. Does that make sense? Because then that kind of goes back to my whole highlighting method, like PPE, total PPE. What line are you on right now? Does it have line numbers? 11, 12, 13. So I would put that on line 13. Let's use line 14 to do total assets. That is where I see total assets going. With the number being 234,120. Would you agree? Like, I think if we're using this whole heading rule with total, so PPE, total PPE, and then have total assets on its own line. We're definitely missing two. The other two were long-term assets and intangible assets. I don't see anything on there that's like goodwill or patents. I don't see anything on that list regarding that. Okay. Are you guys ready to move to the other part? Okay. Do you have a heading that says liabilities on owner's equity? Okay, good. What are the two liability subcategories or subclass? I think the official word is classifications. What are the two? Under liabilities, what are the two? Current liabilities and long-term liabilities. And what's the determining factor there? Less than a year, more than a year. Okay. Let's start with current liabilities. Now, if there's more than one, we'll use the left column and kick the total over in the right column. Do you think there's more than one? I see accounts payable. Do you think they want to get paid within a year? Okay. Here's a little hitch. Are you ready for this? Look at what it says on under A. Prepare a classified balance sheet. Assume that 22,000 of the notes payable will be paid in 2015. So the notes payable that's valued at $97,780, we're going to get 22,000 of it paid off this year, this current year. So even though it's a long-term debt or a long-term liability, 22,000 of it will currently get paid. So that's kind of tricky of them. Now, if you flip them around, if you put AP before NP, I would be fine with that. Why are we using the left column? Because there's more than one. There's even a third, interest payable. Interest payable means interest on our long loan, and that's going to get paid the current year. So interest payable is a form of current. It's going to get paid within a year. Using my highlighter again, current liabilities with a total current liabilities. Love the format there. That looks nice. What's our next classification? Long-term, thank you. How many do we have? Only one, right? Our notes payable is a long-term liability valued at $97,700, but we paid $22,000 in the current year, so the remaining balance would be out here. There's only one, so there's no need to say the one and then say total long-term liabilities. So that's why we're sticking it way out on the right column. We will stop though and say, what are our total liabilities? So the two that are hanging out here, do the math. Last part, owner's equity, and there's only capital listed there. Owner's capital. Let's look at the owner's capital. $115,000. Is that the number we're going to use here? No, no, and no. First of all, if you'd plug that in, it wouldn't equal the assets. Like ALO wouldn't work. A equals L plus OE wouldn't work. So we have to wade for the numbers. We have to do the math for the numbers. The owner's capital, what contributes to making it go up and down? There's a few factors here. Net income makes it go up. What's going to offset it and make it go down? Drawing, okay? Well, they didn't straight up say, here is the net income, but what did they give you? You have to really search for it. What did they give you? They didn't say the net income for 2014 was. Yes, Jenna's right. They gave you all the expenses, they gave you all the revenue. So you have to like really dig for the number. Did they give you drawing as well? There was no drawing. Okay, cool. So we're going to take, and you're going to see the math here, the beginning balance plus net income. Now notice there's a little asterisk there. They showed you how they got the net income, the revenue minus expense, minus expense, minus expense to get the net income. This was revenue minus expense, minus expense, minus expense to equal the net income. Remember, there would be minus drawings here if we had one. We don't have a minus drawings. And if you were doing this on the test and there was drawings and you weren't factoring it in, the ALO wouldn't shake out. So that's where the 6440 came from, revenue minus all of the expenses as Jenna outlined. Notice after the capital, it doesn't say total capital or total owner's equity. It just says total liabilities and owner's equity. And that's where you hope it will equal what your assets did. It's probably easy to talk about it yesterday, a little bit harder to do today. This isn't a perfect problem because I wish they had all the sections. I wish they had the long-term assets. I wish they had the intangibles. I wish they had drawing in there, but again, I'm not the textbook writer, so. What do you think? I really like the next problem because it asks you, look at all these accounts and then classify them. Are they a current asset, a long-term investment, a PPE, or an intangible? Is it a current liability or long-term liability, and is it owner's equity? So here's what I do. I don't think you probably have this in your workbook. I doubt you have 415. So I'd go to a notebook piece of paper and recreate what you see in the book. I'd put, you know, a line and then AP, a line and AR, a line and then cash. So recreate that little list in your notebook and then try to put which classification it belongs to. And they're listed above. I'm going to have you try this on your own. And then we'll go through it. Going back to the Carly question from before, where it says land, it says in use. So the land is being used. That's how they I knew that there were a couple there. So I'll pause the recording and then I'll come back and we'll talk through it. Oh. So on exercise 415, you obviously had to take a look at an account and decide what classification it goes under. In a test scenario, sometimes it'd be better to just maybe put an A, an L, or an OE there first, and then kind of back into which specific classification, just so something's there. Let's take a look at the first couple. Accounts payable would be a current liability because we hope that we can get that paid off within a year or less. Accumulated depreciation on equipment would be PPE. But note that it's a contra asset, so it's got a credit balance that would offset the value of the asset's debit balance. Any questions there? Accounts receivable, kind of like accounts payable, you'd hope you'd get that paid off with, or you'd hope you'd get paid within a year, so a current asset. Buildings are PPE unless they say that they're not in use. Yeah, but you know, if it doesn't say anything like buildings, assume it's in use. If land says nothing, assume it's in use. Yeah, good question. Cash is a current asset, will always be a current asset. Land, so what Jenna just alluded to, does it say land in use? Okay. So assume if it's nothing, it's in use. Sometimes they'll tell you it's in use. But when it's not in use, that's when it becomes a long-term investment. Owner's capital will always be OE, but what I'd put next to that is that there's math involved. You have to add revenue, subtract expenses, subtract drawing. The reason notes payable, which is due in 2 years, is long-term is because it's more than 1 year. So anything beyond 1 year would be considered long-term, and in this case, a liability. The one that we just did was kind of tricky because they said, your note payable, here's what you're going to get paid this year, or here's what you're going to pay off. So it was a partial. Some of it was current, some of it was long-term, and that was kind of an icky one, but I'm glad we did that one together. Patents are always intangible. You can't touch them, although you could maybe touch the product itself. That would be inventory. You know, like the stuff that Superior sells is inventory. The patent that they own the right to the design is intangible and can't be touched. Supplies are current assets, assuming you use them, the pens, the pencils, the notebooks, the paper within a year. Salaries and wages payable, why is that current? A current liability. You're going to pay them. I don't think employees will want to stick around if you're like, yeah, I'll pay in like 2 years. Equipment will be PPE. Inventory, current asset. Again, going back to my Superior example, they have stuff they sell, so the inventory, some of that stuff has patents on them, which is a different kind of asset. Prepaid expenses mean that we've prepaid them, whether it's a prepaid rent or prepaid advertising, we're going to use that up within the year. So anytime you see prepaid, assume that's current. Stock investments. Now, this one was kind of tricky because you see the word investment, you think long-term investment. But you were going to get, what did it say, paid within 7 months or something? Yeah, you're going to sell them within 7 months, so you'll turn that into cash. So that 1 year breaking point is very pivotal between current and long-term. That must be all of them. Yes. I'll stop my recording.